Number 16, Georgia Tech at Wake Forest. It was the home team early and the ranked team late. Wake Forest lost 7 straight games against ranked opponents, but boy, as I mentioned, they came to play today. Already up 7-3. Damon Claiborne finding some daylight, getting to the end zone. 14-3. Demon Deacons on his 5th rushing touchdown of the season. So Georgia Tech was down 20-3 in the second half. 3rd and 10. Haynes King with some time finding Eric Rivers. Deficit cut to 20-10. Georgia Tech 3rd and 4 from Wake's 5. King with the quarterback keeper. 20-17 now on his 6th rushing touchdown of the season. Jump ahead of the dying seconds. They need a field goal. They go to the hero against Clemson, Aiden Burr. Ice in his veins from 33 yards out, and we would go into overtime. Georgia Tech would score in the opening possession of overtime. So let's go to Wake Forest. On the 25, Claiborne bouncing it to the outside, gets the score, and we're going for 2. Stayed just inside the pylon, over the end zone, crossing the line. Here we go. Robbie Ashford. Can he be the hero? Rolling around, evading the tacklers, but Georgia Tech survives to win by 1. Coming to this game nearly 2 touchdown favorites. And the Yellow Jackets start a season 5-0 or better for the first time since 2014. 2nd largest comeback victory in program history. It ties 2022 at UNC for Georgia Tech. Again, down 20-3 in the 3rd quarter. 2nd ever second half comeback of 17 or more. They also did so back in 1998. These are the notable ACC scores from this weekend. Florida State losing at Virginia Friday. A 1-point victory for Georgia Tech at Wake. Duke taking care of Syracuse, and some high-scoring games in that Louisville-Pitt game. I'm Tommy Tran with Mackenzie Brooks and one half of the Cover 3 podcast there with Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell. We're going to get to the sports line model with the inside the lines projections for the ACC in just a second. As for the game itself, Danny Kanell, this was a 20-3 game that Georgia Tech found itself behind, plus 270 on the money line.
Yeah.
And they got it done.
That's right. I did. You know why?
I did.
I think it's the same reason.
You're right. I did catch that ticket.
I think it's the same reason that Brent Key felt pretty good about his squad. There was a moment in that game when they scored their first touchdown. He brought over his quarterback, Haynes King, and he grabbed him around the head, and he was whispering something in his ear. And I bet he said, "I believe in you. You've got this." I mean, and I think that's the biggest compliment you can pay to a player. And I think that's the type of player that Haynes King is that no matter what the score is, you feel like he can put the team on his back and will their way to a win. And then they started to get the stops they needed on defense. And then they started to sort of feel the momentum shift of the ball game. And that's exactly what you want. I mean, Brent Key also told me earlier this year, he said, I don't think there's a player in the country that does more for his team than Haynes King does. So that was my belief that they could turn this around. Also, Wake Forest, a little dicey. You know, it's a first-year coach. They haven't been very good. So a huge, huge moment there for Georgia Tech. You know, an emotional win for them to go on the road. It's a hard-fought victory. At the end of the year, when you're comparing resumes and all this, no one will remember it was that even this close. It's just a win, another win closer to Georgia Tech potentially making that ACC championship run.
You know, we talk a lot about put the team on your back, right? You know, like how much are you really willing to carry? So Haynes King had 42 pass attempts in this game. He had 21 recorded rushes. He was the leading rusher for this team. He had total, I kid you not, 349 yards all to himself. This is somebody who is willing to own the responsibility of everything that is going to happen for Georgia Tech this season. And when you've got someone like that, it is totally understandable why Brent Key trusts him so much. I will say that for Georgia Tech defensively, this kind of shows the highs and lows. They can have some breakdowns. They are not dominant enough that as we start to look at the rest of the schedule, just because they've got a 0 in the loss column and just because they've got a couple big wins to their name, we cannot trust that they're going to be able to win every single game because Haynes King can go out there and play hero ball. This is a defense that has to be better about giving up explosive plays because Wake Forest had 17 on the board like that. and then they had to settle in, and they did a pretty good job of being able to contain both Purdy and Ashford, the two different quarterbacks that Wake Forest likes to use. So great response on both sides of the ball. But to me, again, 53 plays where Haynes King was saying, "Get on my back, boys. We ain't losing today."
He's going to need, you know what our Brian McFadden calls him? He calls him Haynes Rocky Balboa King.
Yes.
The dude is always hurt. I mean, he's going to need the cold tub. He's going to need the hot tub. He's going to need every bit of a bag of ice on every nick and brew that he's got. But it was well worth it to him. And that's your biggest concern with Georgia Tech, is because he takes so many hits, can he endure the pounding that he's going to take by the workload that he takes on?
That guy genuinely plays football like he does not care about the last 5 years of his life. He's like, you know what? It's not worth it.
243 through the air, 106 on the ground. Mr. Everything there for the Yellow Jackets, who again go to 5-0. Kens, I come to you. The Florida State loss on Friday. We do know that there are a handful of ACC schools still to play tonight, but they don't really factor into the CFP. What's sort of the updated outlook for the conference right now?
Coming off of Friday night, I think the Big 12 and the ACC did the Big 10 and some SEC some favors here. I think you see a TCU loss to Arizona State, an Arizona State team that lost to Mississippi State, one of the worst teams in the SEC. You see FSU allowed 46 points to Virginia Tech. Parity in football is great. Parity in football is great for certain conferences. When it comes to at-large bids, it's not great for a conference like the ACC. So even Georgia Tech not killing Wake Forest, like that's a team we thought they would beat them by around 20, right? So yes, they take the win, but this is just looking more and more like a one-bid ACC conference for us, because it's probably just going to be Miami. If they can see Miami make their way to the ACC Conference Championship, they see Miami win that, I don't see a version of a story where they necessarily feel like they have to take another at-large bid.
You guys agree?
No, not at all. There's still a lot of football left. I mean, are we seeing Miami next week going to Tallahassee and just walking in there, a place that Alabama went to from the almighty SEC and got stomped by 2 touchdowns? Are we just saying Miami can go in there and put forth an effort where all of a sudden they win? And I think the greatest thing about the ACC that it has going for it is exactly what happened last year, where we've gotten these guaranteed conference champions from the Power 5 to get in, where if Miami does run the table, they still have to win the ACC. And if they lose in that game, like a similar situation that happened last year, everybody wrote off Clemson and said, they're 9-3, they have no chance. And then all of a sudden, they get an incredible win over SMU, and you get 2 bids from the league. So I think that's the scenario you look at for the ACC and say, you know what? Maybe there is a chance they get 2 in.
The SMU was on no one's radar to be able to be a college football playoff team. You were like, okay, like this is they were 8-0 in the American before they show up in the ACC. You're like, hey, they could be a dark horse. They've got a nice, favorable schedule. But the idea that they would be in the college football playoff was a surprise. And I think that the ACC and the Big 12 are all both looking at that position where, okay, we know our champion's going to be in, but what is the record of the next best team, and how does that end up playing out? Because look, Georgia Tech, they could beat Georgia in the regular season finale. You know, there are options to be able to get you there. Virginia.
Wait a second. The ACC could never beat an SEC team. I mean, they could never go to 9 overtimes and take them right to the wire, even though it was one of the best Georgia teams that we thought we could ever see. I mean, how could that ever happen?
And now we took away.
We just saw it happen.
Now we took away Kirby's ability to call timeout every single time that he sees your look. You know, we got the Kirby Smart overtime rule in place.
It's not a head-to-head situation. Can the ACC beat the SEC? I think Miami would definitely be an at-large team that gets in the college football playoff if they make it to the ACC championship and they lose. This isn't me saying like Georgia Tech's going to win the ACC and doesn't deserve it.
What if Florida State goes 10-2 and they're compared to a 9-3 team from the SEC, but they do have that win over Alabama? Like, we're supposed to be rewarding strength of schedule.
Right.
In that circumstance, I think that is a huge feather in Florida State's cap that would actually make their resume look pretty dang good.
Okay, let me throw this one at you. So let's say Virginia makes the ACC championship game.
Whoa, there we go. All right.
Virginia makes the ACC championship game. They play against Miami. Miami wins, but Virginia's now just sitting there as just a 1-loss or 2-loss team. Like, are they out?
I mean, I don't have them projected to just be a 1 or 2 loss team. I mean, we're talking about I like Georgia Tech. I think they're going to lose another game this football season. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. And then if you lose to Georgia, you lose another game here. You're a 2-loss team headed into that ACC Conference Championship, potentially against the Miami. I don't think they would take them.
But see, I look at the game that we're seeing today, Ole Miss LSU, where I think those teams are all right, but they're going to have multiple losses at the end of the season too, and yet their chances are 86% for Ole Miss if they win and 80% if it's LSU. Why is it any different for them?
I mean, I think Ole Miss becomes a 10-2 team. I don't think you're going to see as many 10-2 teams, especially from the ACC with all the parity we're seeing, but it's just, I'm not saying any of this is just.
But what about head-to-head results?
Like, I'm just saying it is. It's in front of
What
me.
about head-to-head results? Because the committee uses head-to-head results to be able to split ties.
Right.
And if we've got this domino effect where everyone's beating up on each other, you are going to have scenarios where it's very difficult for the committee to slot some of these teams.
There's also something, I think, to be said, whether the committee admits it or not, to the conversations about preseason rankings, and Georgia Tech was nowhere near that. So you wonder, even though they beat Clemson, which now out of those Clemson wins, whether you're LSU, whether you're Georgia Tech, is a little devalued, where they jump in a little late. So like, even if they win out, what's the peak for Georgia Tech going to that Georgia
sort of
game?
like an Arizona State situation.
Kind of, right? And you got to figure out what's going to happen there.
I mean, you're going to think about Georgia Tech's, their best wins are against Clemson, who's just, it's not that impressive anymore, and against Colorado as well, and you go to the wire with Wake Forest. Like, their strength of schedule is going to be a difficult conversation come.
Well, that's where I think they have to be 11-1 at worst with a loss to Georgia, and that's it. And but at 10-2, I do think it gets interesting, because then I think it's not so much about what's the most impressive win. It's about 10 wins in totality, and then it's who are you comparing them to. That's why it's so hard to do this conversation a month into the season, because we're projecting wins and losses. If we've learned anything, there have been some surprising upsets so far, one of them being last with Florida State losing to Virginia. And those are going to continue to come. So it's really hard to compare the future. All we have to go by is what we know now. Like even Georgia Tech, like I think they're probably going to be favored in every single game. But as we saw, they're vulnerable just like everybody in the country is.
Right. I mean, if you have a 60% of field goal chance to beat everyone left on your schedule, you whittle down 0.6 times 0.6 times 0.6. It still becomes a very small percent chance to win out. So what is difficult, and I think it is a shame, is I do think committee members will look at SMU last year and how they performed in the college football playoff. And I think it's going to ding the ACC. I think they're going to think really hard about this second at-large bid that could potentially come from that conference.
One data point that the committee uses that I really don't like is record against the committee's top 25. And what happens is, if you don't have any teams from your conference in the committee's top 25, then the teams you're trying to get into the college football playoff don't have wins against top 25 teams in the eyes of the committee. This is when I've been using the phrase all week on the Cover 3 podcast, the crab in a bucket that is the ACC. If they all keep beating up on each other, you don't have anybody in the top 25 but Miami, then Miami even struggles to be able to have a good seed and have a good standing within the field because it doesn't have wins against other top 25 teams in the eyes of the committee.
It's interesting how this will all play out. Again, we're still very much early in the season to talk about, but go year to year with the committee, expanded football playoff, and how much like an SMU and Indiana plays in, how much they reverse course correct type of thing. And of course, we talked about format, seeding changes, all that good stuff. Good news is, still plenty of football to talk about it and compare programs. Guys, certainly appreciate it. Shout out to Inside the Lines, giving us weekly and daily updates that we could use on CBS Sports HQ. And at your disposal, scan the QR code. Make sure you check them out today.